Welcome to Catholic Life as we spotlight ordinary people with extraordinary faith. I am Dina Dow, your host. Welcome to this half hour as we once again explore the beautiful, rich history of St. Joseph's Cemetery here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And with us is Karen Rowley. You were with us previously a few months ago
I was.
to share the history and the joy. So we're coming back to this again, just kind of a revisit of St. Joseph's Cemetery, the history, the rich history behind it, and then also the events that are coming up. We'll talk about that in the second half. So, but first of all, tell us a little bit about you. You're on the board of directors. But before that, tell us about your family, what parish you belong to, and any ministries that you're involved with.
I am not, as you can probably tell, I am not a native of Louisiana. my parents were born and raised in central New York, and many years ago moved to Georgia. So basically, I grew up in the South, but in Georgia. Raised Catholic, big Catholic family. I was one of six, and I majored in journalism. And so I worked in North Carolina, Florida, and then eventually ended up here in working for the Baton Rouge Business Report. Now I work for the Legislative Auditor's Office. I'm their communications director.
Oh, wow.
But all along the way, I went to Catholic school. When I was in college, I worked with they were the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet, who taught Sunday school. I worked with them, and then when I got here, after some years, I'm also interested in history, and they were looking for board members for the cemetery to help with the maintenance and publicity of it, and so that was how I got involved, and it tied, two things together: both the importance of honoring the dead to Catholics, but also my love for history. So I enjoyed that.
That's a great combination too of your joy and your charisms, and then what piqued your interest in that. Are you a parishioner at St. Joseph's Cathedral, or do you worship elsewhere?
No, I'm a parishioner at the cathedral.
Yeah. So you heard about the board and the movement of St. Joseph's Cemetery, and that caught your eye.
It did, and I talked to the pastor at the time, and he didn't waste any time in notifying letting one of the board members know, and Anne Felice Fourier, and she contacted me. And initially, when I started working on the board, it was to take over their newsletter because they'd had some problems with, it's hard to do, and they wanted to kind of step back and reset it, and so I took on that project, which was a labor of love. It let me continue with some aspect of journalism with the stories, and also to try to put it together so that people start to understand some of the tales that we were able to tell about the cemetery.
Yeah, and that's the only way is through that means, right? Through communications, which the Lord brought all of those gifts into this ministry, which is what I love about people that have professional degrees and professional lives that also pour that into their church ministry and their volunteerism, which is, and I'm sure Father was like, oh yes, we have a journalist, we need a newsletter updated, that's perfect.
It is interesting because it's not something I would have foreseen.
Exactly.
But the fact that it came together at that point.
Tell me about the first time you actually walked through St. Joseph's Cemetery. Do you remember the first time you walked through it?
I do. I was with the sexton, Chip Landry, and Chip knows, he's been working with the cemetery for a few decades now, and he knows pretty much every spot in the cemetery, who's buried where, and he knows their stories. And so we're walking, and he's just rattling these things off, and the information and about the people and about the history and their impact on Baton Rouge and how it tells a story of the city and how it grew and evolved over 300 some odd years.
Yeah.
And I was amazed, really.
Yeah.
So.
Well, talk to us about that. Tell us about the initial roots of the cemetery that was located in one part of the city, but then moved right where its current location is. So tell us about the story.
When the Spanish took over the area, in trying to, previously the English had it and the French had it, and the Spanish were trying to tighten their grip, I guess, on
Yeah.
a Protestant, basically a Protestant population. And so the king ordered the construction of a formal Catholic church. So that was in 1792.
Right.
And Our Lady of Sorrows Church was established on the site where St. Joseph Cathedral is now. And in tandem with that was a formal cemetery that was located behind the church on land that is now North Street, between 4th and 5th Streets. And so that was the origin for the cemetery. And it stayed there until about the 1820s, when essentially it had run out of room. There just was no more space. And the city was growing. And at that point, the church, the pastor tasked 4 gentlemen with finding land to move the cemetery. And those 4 men were Philip Hickey, Armand Duplanche, Michael Brannigan, and B.T. Beauregard. And eventually the property they found is where the cemetery is today, which is on Main Street between roughly 15th and 17th Streets. And they bought that property in 1825. Okay. And the cemetery was formally consecrated the following year, and burial started there. And at the same time, the church asked families with those buried behind the church to move them. Some did, a lot did not. And by the 1850s, the church asked the city if the city would move the remaining graves out to Main Street. Church would cede the property to the city so they could build the road there.
Gotcha.
And that's how, and so most of them were, we believe most of them were moved.
Yeah, which
there.
is a formal process too.
Yes.
Yeah. So the cemetery is celebrating 200 years.
200 years at the Main Street location,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, which is remarkable, and even had a previous history to that within the formal site now. About how many souls are buried in St. Joseph Seminary?
There were about 3,000 souls buried there. It's, which is not apparent when you look at it because it doesn't look like there are that many tombs and markers. What we know from church records and the diocesan records, we know people were buried there. There are not always markers, or if there were, they've sunk or they were destroyed. But no, when we counted it up, it's a large number of people.
It's closed, right, to any more souls to be buried there, or is there still plots available for families?
It's classified as inactive. And what that means is that we can have up to 5 burials in a year, but only if the family already owns the plot and if there's space.
Oh, yeah.
And so we may have 1 or 2 a year. Some years there aren't any at all. But yes, essentially it's closed.
Yeah. So you talked about the souls that are buried there that tell the story of the city of Baton Rouge. So can you recall a few of them that were founders or foundresses of our city?
So one of the earliest settlers of the city was a gentleman named Jean-Baptiste Poré. He was French, obviously. He came to this country. He was from an aristocratic family in France, and he fled during the French Revolution when the revolutionaries were hunting down the aristocrats. But he ended up here after marrying a woman in Canada who was also French, and he's interesting because he's descended from Charlemagne, William the Conqueror, and a whole host of leaders. And we know this because one of his descendants, he's a retired judge now, John Harrison, who lives up in Monroe, but Judge Harrison did an incredibly extensive dive into the background, and he could trace it all the way back there. So he's there. They're one of the Spanish, Jose Bahamond, he was involved in the Revolutionary War. He is buried there, as are some of his descendants. Moving further along in history, we have the second doctor in the city, Jean-Bertrand Duchesne. He's buried there with his wife. Trying to think some of the others. There are a lot of businessmen and merchants. Théophile Bertrand, who owned a lot of property and in fact sold some of the property to the church at one time when they built the boys' school behind the church.
Yeah.
Dr. Duchenne actually sold to the city the lot at North and 4th Streets, which is where it was the post office, but now it's the city club.
Oh,
that
that's
building,
right.
that's where
Yeah.
he owned that property.
Wow.
Marie Adrian Persack, who is an artist and a cartographer and photographer, but he's best known probably for, it's a 5-foot-high map of every plantation along the lower Mississippi from, I think it's Natchez, all the way down to New Orleans.
Yeah.
And as well as his paintings. He did a lot of the paintings. Philip Hickey, we are reasonably sure he's buried there. And I say that because there are markers for his wife and a couple of his children, and the church records say he's buried there, but we have never been able to find the marker.
Yeah.
But given the design of the tomb, it's a vaulted tomb.
Yeah.
He is probably here as well, and he was he owned a lot of plantations. He started the first sugar mill. He served in the war in 1812. He was a state senator, I think. There are about 80 Confederate soldiers and 21 Union soldiers who are buried in the cemetery.
Oh, wow.
And most of the Union soldiers, those date from 1862, with the Battle of Baton Rouge during the Civil War. And most of the Union soldiers passed away from disease as opposed to the battle.
Yeah.
There are a lot of graves in there where you can see that they died perhaps during flu epidemics or yellow fever epidemics up to a certain
Because
point.
there's a lot. And then there are some priests buried there too. Is that right, I recall?
There,
The Jesuits?
well, the Jesuits were buried there. There were 3 Jesuit priests and 2 brothers who were buried there until 1901, roughly, when the order exhumed them and moved them to the Jesuit cemetery at Spring Hill College and reinterred them. But there is a memorial there to the 5 of them because they were there during the Civil War. They were from 1849 to 1865, and so they were doing a lot of ministry to a population, under siege. In fact, one of them had to report, to the Union commandant every day because they didn't trust him, I guess.
They wanted to make sure that, they were serving.
Yeah.
That's a rich history in less than 5 minutes. I mean, I can only imagine more stories out there. We're going to take a break. Yeah. And it went by fast.
It did go by fast.
When we come back, we'll talk about the events that are coming up.
Sure.
Maybe some ways that people can support the cemetery too and its preservation. Okay. Stay with us. We'll be right back in just a minute.
If I could write a note to my younger self, here's what I'd say. Everything you're feeling now won't always keep you down. There'll be better days. Dear me, don't worry about it. You're gonna be alright. You'll see. You'll see. Dear me, it's gonna be alright, alright. Trust me, all of the pain is all gonna fade. It'll all get better soon. You'll see. Dear me.
When storms hit, we are there to rebuild. As our neighbors age, we lighten their burdens. As our veterans adjust, we ease their transitions. In every part of the country, we are there. We are Catholic Charities. We serve millions each year regardless of their faith. We put food back on tables, unlock doors, and walk together on the road back. Help Catholic Charities serve your neighbors in need. Join us at wearethere.us.
Welcome back to Catholic Life as we spotlight ordinary people with extraordinary faith. I am Dina Dow, continuing our conversation with Karen Rowley on the St. Joseph Cemetery and its 200th anniversary this year. So we just talked about all the kind of some of the stories of the souls that are buried there. Just kind of in a nutshell, so why is it important to preserve these type of cemeteries and these places where people are laid to rest?
I think there are a few reasons. One is of course, to honor the dead, to keep their memories alive. Another is it helps show us where we came from and how we got there and how we got here, and maybe give us some insight into going forward. It's also a lot of these tombs, the way they're constructed. These are works of art. These were craftsmen who built these tombs, and it's important from that standpoint to see how, in the same way that we treasure cathedrals and churches that have just incredible design that you have to think was inspired by the Lord and how they should use their talents. And so you see that as well particularly with the restoration and preservation work. You're looking at various tombs, and there's a wide variety in the cemetery that are some are indicative of the tombs in New Orleans. Some are unique, and they show different periods of time and how it all evolved.
Yeah, wow. And that's a beautiful history just in and of itself, is the art and architecture that goes behind the construction to honor the soul that is buried there and their family who's there with them too. So you all it's open pretty much to the public. People can go. I was thinking about social studies teachers, taking classes, to tour. And I'm sure if they go on the website, maybe there's information about that. It's St. Joseph Cemetery, br.org, and Saint is spelled out.
Right.
But you all have some events coming up really soon in October 19th and then November 2nd. So tell us about those.
So these two events are a continuation of our celebration of 200 years at the Main Street location. The October 19th event is it's from 2 to 4, so it's a Sunday afternoon. It is open to the public. And the way we've got it worked out, Emily Ford, who is with Oak and Laurel Cemetery Preservation, which is a small company out of New Orleans, but she and her colleagues have been doing the work, some of the restoration work. She's going to give a short presentation about St. Joseph Cemetery specifically, but also the question of why is preservation important? Why should we do that? And then we're going to break people up into groups, and we have picked about 8 different tombs in the cemetery, and we're going to do a little tour around with stops at each one, and somebody will be there to talk very briefly about who's buried there, about the tomb itself, why it's of interest. And the idea is to introduce people to the cemetery. It's not widely known anymore, in part because it's not an active cemetery, but just to let people know it's there and to let them know the role it's played in Baton Rouge's history. Admission is free. We're not charging, we'll take donations if anybody wants to give them, but it's more come and find out about the cemetery. And we've termed it, come meet the saints and sinners of St. Joseph Cemetery.
That's great.
We're not saying who's who. It's just we're all saints and sinners at one time or another, and so it's in that spirit. And then the final event will be November 2nd, which is All Souls Day. And that will have we'll have Mass. It's also a Sunday.
It's a Sunday, this year.
So the 10:30 Mass, and then there'll be a luncheon at St. Joseph Cathedral in the parish hall, and then we'll do the blessing of the graves afterward at the cemetery.
Is that driving distance then, when people go to Mass and then the reception and then drive over to the cemetery, or?
Yes, and it's about 5 minutes from the cathedral. It's a very short drive. And
that's exciting too. I love the way for the October 19th event, for when people are telling the story about the soul, they're also again telling the history of the community, and some of the roots that these names are very familiar. Some names have gotten more press than others, And just that opportunity to be able to share those stories and the hearts from the graves is beautiful.
And you're right, some of the names will be very familiar, but some of them probably are not.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking in particular, we have 3 Black Reconstruction era legislators
Yes.
who are buried in the cemetery. So
Yeah.
these were free men of color, who were 2 were voted into the legislature, the House of Representatives in 1868 and served.
Wow.
1 in 1872, but they were all successful businessmen. And I don't think people realized, we didn't realize it honestly until we found one of the markers, and then doing the research, that's when we realized that we had them buried there. I'm trying to think of some of the others. Well, the dollhouse tomb. Now the dollhouse is one of it's the most recognizable tomb because it is literally shaped like a dollhouse, and it's one of our former board members, Kenny Kleinpeter, did some work on it and cleaned it all up and then repainted it in the original colors of the Italian flag because it would belong to Mary Lucille Barcelona, who was 3, unfortunately, when she died, and her family built that as a tribute to her. She is not there anymore. The family eventually moved her to the family plot in Roselawn, but it's still very striking, both in its design, but also in its tribute to a little girl who was lost too soon. So,
Yeah, I was thinking about the stories that tell the story of the community. So the 3 Black gentlemen that were there that were advocates, and also 2, men of color that went on to serve in the state legislature, which those stories need to be told widely.
Yes.
And then the opportunity too of like even children. So you think about all the stories that go behind that. And the loss of a child, and all those things are still very real today, very real. And the prayerfulness, I think of it too, and the respect and honoring, which is why cemeteries, when you walk into a cemetery, I notice that people are very quiet.
Yes.
There's a sense of reverence when you walk into a cemetery. You don't have people screaming and playing football, whatever.
That's right.
Why do you think that is? When people are walking among the souls.
I think it's a combination of things. It is that, as you say, that reverence for people who have gone before us. I think it's also a recognition of our own mortality and the fact that we are going to be someplace similar, at some point, and hoping that, we've lived good enough lives that we will, be rewarded afterward. But it's and thinking about it, particularly if it's you have family buried in the cemetery, it's thinking that they have gone on to a better place, and that you wish that for them, you believe that for them, and you want to honor that.
And it's a sacred space. I mean, the graves are blessed, each year.
Yeah.
And as to are the souls that are buried there. So I'm thinking about kind of the notion of evangelizing from the past to us today, and how their lives can teach us something about not only how to live in community, but also living our lives of great faith. And then the missionary activity of those that weren't even from here, they came to the United States from Spain and Canada and France and all over. That not only they came for work or to flee whatever persecution, they also brought their faith with them too.
They did bring their faith with them, and they being able to worship was important. Having a priest available was important. And for a while there was not a priest assigned to the area. It really wasn't until the Spanish built Our Lady of Sorrows Church that it was an Irish priest, because the Spanish king had asked the Pope to assign Irish priests who knew Spanish, because the population there were a lot of English-speaking people. And so Father Charles Burke was the first priest formally assigned to come and really make a foothold for the Catholic Church in
Where
the
people
area.
could have a community and a
Right.
home and a church to
Yeah.
call their own too. I was thinking about what would Spanish sound like coming from an Irish one too.
I know.
I was thinking I do a great job. What are the greatest needs right now, and how can people serve for the cemetery and its preservation?
The cemetery, I mean, over the decades, the problems have always been the same. It's you need the grass cut, you need the fence repaired and or painted. And we have a maintenance fund, and people have been very generous in donating, but we need continued donations. We're not a perpetual care cemetery because it's too old. That hadn't been started by when this cemetery was established, because the presumption was that the families would always take care of the graves of their loved ones. And over 200 years, families have either moved away or they've passed on, and there just isn't anybody to do that. So we welcome any and all donations of any size. It all goes toward the maintenance of the cemetery. We have a list of specific tombs that Emily Ford suggested were the best ones to focus on for restoration because of their style or the way they were built. And we're working our way through that list slowly. I think the Petitjean tomb is the second major one, and it's a very distinctive tomb, and we wrote about it in our fall 2024 newsletter if anybody wants to go online and look at it. But it has a very distinctive curved roof and oven vaults, and it is the most costly of the restoration projects. But we thought, with the 200th anniversary, we should just swing for the fences, and we were very successful with the soiree that we held in April that gave us a good start. So donations are always welcome. Prayers are always welcome. Any information that people have, if they have relatives buried ancestors buried in the cemetery, we would love to know that, because sexton records are missing for a large section of the cemetery's history. So anything that people, if they've got pictures or stories that they would be willing to let us make copies of, we would be very grateful for that. And then as far as like cleanup days, we're trying to work that out there are ways to clean the graves, so that they remain intact. And when we get that organized enough, we'll ask for volunteers and see if anybody would like to come help us.
That would be a beautiful community day.
Yeah.
Karen, thanks so much for being with us and pouring all your love into this mission of preservation of St. Joseph Cemetery, as we celebrate 200 years of all those souls that were buried there and the moments of stories that can continue to evangelize us. So thank you for what you do and serving on that board. And may the souls of all the faithful departed through the mercy of God rest in peace. And may the Lord shine his light upon all of them in his perpetual light. Thank you for being with us on Catholic Life. Until next time, may God bless you and grant you his peace.